when you look at our space, it's and really the knowledge base behind 1031s, I call it it's like an inch wide, mile deep, right? And it's also generally fixed. Like it doesn't change dynamically month to month or year to year. It's pretty fixed in its knowledge base. There's a little bit new, but generally speaking, it's this inch wide, mile deep, fixed domain. That is perfect for training an LLM on.
Welcome to the Path to Passive podcast, where we talk about building wealth and empowering lifestyle through commercial real estate investing for tech professionals. I always wish that other tech professionals reaching financial freedom had documented their journey along the way, so I'm doing it for the rest of us. Join us as we explore stories, many failures, and lessons learned along the way. I hope you enjoy and subscribe. Hey, what if I told you there's an option for you to save tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars on your next real estate sale, and most investors don't even know it exists, let alone are using it? In this episode, I get to sit down with Jon Hilley, Mr. 1031 himself, the co-founder and CEO of 1031 Specialists. We talk about why the 1031 is such a huge opportunity and how it actually is, working with his team, a two-way door. Or you can go through, check it out, and if it isn't for you, then you can just turn back around and close that door, but you'd be foolish not to go ahead and look into it. We talk about how his team is helping out investors, the huge opportunity, and of course, him and his team myth busting, breaking myths, getting education out there, and why this is such a huge opportunity. Also, we talk about how his team helped to solve a problem for themselves as real estate investors to save on taxes and defer those taxes for themselves, turn around and use AI, use technology, and offer that out to the industry and, of course, other real estate investors as well. So definitely tune in, listen, take some notes. Of course, check out the 1031 Specialist site. And for more information about real estate investments and other news, check out my site, Arita Capital, where you can sign up for a newsletter as well and get that direct to your inbox every 2 weeks. Please sit back, enjoy, take some notes. All right, welcome to another show of Path to Passive. I'm your host, Stephen Reed, and I'm super stoked to have Jon Hilley here, Mr. 1031 from 1031 Specialists. We have got a super cool episode for you today, and I'm really excited to get in. We have, actually, I'm not going to spoil it, but the gentleman that we have here today has started his career in, doing analyst work at Goldman Sachs and has had a bunch of experience that brought him all the way to today. And he explains it in 3 different phases to talk about his life story. I'd love for you, Jon, to talk about just quickly, who you are, how you'd introduce yourself, and then walk us through, what 1031 is first, and then we'll get into your background.
Right on. Well, great to be here, and thanks for having me. So yeah, I would just sort of describe myself as sort of having, I think there's some people that can direct their career by thinking forward where they want to be when they're 45 and 50 years old and kind of work backwards in a straight line, right? That is definitely not my career. So I started at Goldman. I worked on the buy side as a hedge fund analyst, doing equity long-short research at a deep value fund. And spent about 10 years as an investor. And that was really what I wanted to do, what I set out to do. And after 10 years, I said, wow, this has been a really great experience, but man, wouldn't it be cool to understand, instead of just staying in the spreadsheets, getting out of the spreadsheets and actually understanding how the businesses work operationally. Mm-hmm. And so I was at a family office that was started by a mentor of mine at Goldman. And we were early days investors in some cannabis companies, really early, circa 2013 kind of era. And, the more I started digging in, I just said to myself, this is a really interesting opportunity. And I think it needs to level up in professional acumen and real horsepower, but there's a lot of interesting infrastructure to be built here. And so decided, okay, I want to sort of leave the phase 1 of my career and start operating cannabis companies. And so I became the CFO of a few cannabis companies, had some exits, and the last one, which took up sort of the last handful of years of phase 2 of my life, was a firm out of Denver called Mile High Labs, and it was the largest extractor of industrial hemp into CBD in the world. So did that, and once we sold that business, it was about 10 years as an operator in the cannabis space. I just said to myself, I really don't want to be in this business anymore.
Okay.
It was a constant battle of every day was a war zone in terms of regulatory changes and battles there, battling with clients and customers over getting our money that they owe us, and it's just what I thought would accelerate quickly into real professional operations across the country. I think because of certain dynamics didn't happen in that way, and so left that. Had about a year off to sort of figure out what was next, and was working with a VC buddy around this idea in real estate around these products called Delaware statutory trusts, and kicked the tires on that. Decided after some months of work that, man, this is a really good idea. Someone should build this idea. It's probably going to take $50 million to build it and 5 years of your life. And that person is definitely not me because I just did that. Yeah. So I decided that was a hard no. But inside of that ecosystem were these little firms called Qualified Intermediaries. And Qualified Intermediaries are the firms required to help investors when they want to do a 1031 exchange. And I said, this big thing is not for me, but this little thing down here is interesting. And so I started kind of peeling back the onion on Qualified Intermediaries, understanding the market structure, who operates, how they operate, and just became more convinced that like this was an idea that I could do and do myself and self-fund it. And my conclusion right before I started was like, if I can't be successful at this QI business, then the problem in life is me. And so that was the kick in the butt. We started at 1031 specialists about 3 years ago now, and we're now one of the top 10 QIs in the country. So everything's been going really well, and it's been a fun journey.
Yeah, that's I'm trying to keep track of the nuggets that you're kind of putting out there, starting with, it's kind of been a meandering journey from, if I remember correctly, learning more about you was coming out of college and thinking, like you just said, not having this massive vision, but just thinking about what is the next best step that kind of works for me, and kind of taking you where your interests are, and going from, analyst to, going to that family office to Mile High Labs, and, going from Florida out to, Denver, and then taking that year off to have some space to think as well. It's just kind of been like that life that's been unfolding for you. And it looks like it's been serving you pretty well too.
Random walks can work sometimes.
That's super cool. I mean, even you just talking about, well, yeah, then, I went to this family office. It's like that itself is kind of like a really cool place where, you had talked in other places, being unconstrained, being able to just take your skills, analyze things, and invest in some of these emerging assets, emerging we'll call it ventures as well, right? And so it sounds like that analyst skill that you developed served you pretty well along the way too. Would you say?
Yeah, I think attention to detail and knowing what good looks like kind of comes from those early years in my career, for sure.
Super cool. I'm curious, what can you just touch on some of the skills that you learned at each of these different roles? Maybe just kind of look back and think about, the analyst skill, like you were talking about, attention to detail, like similar to, looks like Brightpoint Capital, HIG Capital the year before, continuing to be the analyst skill, and then corporate strategy, and then moving to be an operator. Like, what are just some of the things that come to mind? It doesn't have to be role by role, but just looking back, like how you skill stacked as things looked interesting to you from one thing to another. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think, in the beginning, it's just the foundational building blocks that you really need. And you get a little bit of that in college, but you get a lot of it from your first few career opportunities, right? And so In my part of the world, it's going to be different for many of your listeners, but in my part of the world, it was going through the CFA program, right? And that and all of
Chartered
the
financial analyst, right?
yeah, it takes the average person 5 years to complete the CFA program, which is basically a test a year for 3 years, and most people fail twice.
Mm-hmm.
I think AI just finished it in like 37 minutes last week. So the world is changing fast on us, of course, but yeah, it is the sort of foundational technical building blocks of what you need to do. And you get that through study, you get that through extracurricular study, and then you get that through clients that are demanding of you and require and have a certain expectation of excellence. So I think if you can sort of abstract away the finance part and talk more broadly, it is, level one is the technical skill set and development, right? And then you sort of learn it's every job, no matter what job you have, if you want to be really successful, is actually a sales job.
Right.
You're selling yourself, you're selling your firm, you're selling someone on something, and even in the hedge fund world, you're selling your PM on the idea that you have, right? And so you want to be intellectually rigorous, but you want to because you're so convicted about that idea, you want to go in and take a big position in the fund, right? So you have to sell someone on that. So I think once you build the technical skill set, the sales side needs to come. And I think you start really small and you sort of figure it out as you go. Obviously, there's a bunch of stuff online to learn about that if you wanted to. And then it is, I think you sort of, at least for me, it was the beginning of the conviction that I can basically do anything I want, right? And
Nice.
I think you need to build that confidence over time. But once you believe that, then it's easy to go talk to people about raising $100 million for your idea, right? It's no longer scary because you've got the technical skill set, you've got the sales ability, and then it's just about finding the right idea and executing. Right?
Yeah.
And sure, the execution is absolutely the hard part, but yeah. So those are to sort of like make it applicable across industry. Those are the sort of main components I would say in my career that have worked for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for abstracting some of that too, but definitely, right? It's just dropping some early nuggets right here. But let's get into the 1031 part of this, right? As you have talked about your journey and looking at, the DSTs, Delaware Statutory Trusts, as well as the qualified intermediaries or 1031s. Talk about just briefly, what that 1031 is, how you see yourself as, education first, and talk to us about like the thesis, the problem in that you're seeing here across, I don't know, the nation here, what the problem that you're seeing and what you look to solve and why it is a problem.
So you own an investment property and you're getting ready to sell this investment property. Okay. You have one of two choices. Choice A is you just sell it and you pay up to 40% tax on your gains. Okay. Option two is, well, you defer all of those taxes. And if you want to defer all of those taxes, you need to do a 1031 exchange. Okay. The 1031 exchange is the sale of one investment property and the purchase of another within 180 days. Okay. We can get into the rules and the things around it, but quite simply, you are trading one investment property for another. And to be clear, investment property is broadly defined. So you can go from an Airbnb, for example, into an office building or into a billboard or into water rights or oil and gas rights. You can do this anywhere in the country. So you can trade from California to Texas or from Texas to Florida. So your options, once you consider the expansiveness of the types of sub-asset classes in real estate and the geographies you can go into, you have almost unlimited options, right?
Absolutely.
So you just sell your investment property, buy another one in this time frame. You have to hire a qualified intermediary to help you facilitate that exchange. We are a required function by the IRS as part of this. But that's really it. If you can do these few things, you'll defer those taxes, which makes sense on one trade. But if you keep doing that, you keep compounding, what happens? Well, number one, if you don't pay the tax and you defer it, you have more money to reinvest in your next property, right? So there you go. You're sort of beginning this wealth compounding effect, right? And you can do the simple math on this. I did it, and it went sort of semi-viral on X. But if you do a table and you do sort of the number of transactions on the left column, deferring your taxes in the middle and then paying taxes on the right, 30% each time. After 10 transactions, everything else being equal, you are $3.75 million richer if you do a 1031 exchange versus paying the tax each time.
Crazy.
And if you do this 20 times, because the power of compounding, you understand this, but you do it 20 times, you're almost $300 million richer.
Right.
Right. Now that's math. It's a table. It's not reality per se, but it gives you an indication that you're better off on one trade doing a 1031, but you're magnificently better off if you keep compounding your wealth. And so a lot of our, high net worth clients, they've been playing this game for a long time, which is I'm a high income earner over here. Okay. I have a high W-2. If I have a spouse and I can get, real estate professional status, I can buy an investment property. I can take advantage of these new bonus depreciation rules and depreciate that property quickly against my W-2 income. So therefore, I'm avoiding all tax altogether on my income and elsewhere. And once I depreciate that property down, I then 1031 into a higher basis property and run the depreciation schedule all over again. Mm-hmm. This is the path that so many real estate investors have taken over the years to build this, centimillionaire sort of net worth, nine-figure net worth across, all over the country. And you're helped even more today by the big, beautiful bill that passed that, reinstated bonus depreciation to 100%. So the point is, there are these rules in the tax code. They're not loopholes. They're literally written into the tax code. For example, the 1031 exchange has been around for almost 100 years.
Yep.
And so they're here. They're here to incentivize development of the country. Why not leverage those to your benefit?
So thank you for laying that out. And the power of that compound interest or compounding and consistency of doing those transaction over transaction. I always think about that, really simplified model of you double your penny, right? And by the 18th time, it's millions, right? But just like you were talking about, doing that transaction over 10 times at whatever the dollar amount of that probably average medium home property value, I would think you probably used, but from like 3.2 million at 10 to like a magnitude of 10, like 300 million, 10 more times after that is massive. And you said something interesting here, too, that I just wanted to pull on, which was, this has been 1031, a portion of the tax code has been around for like 100 years. And so, and you talked about qualified intermediaries, which, you are as well, 1031 specialists. But the people that are, or the intermediaries, these firms that are doing this, there's only a handful, right? I would say a handful. There's, you tell me how many there are, and they're probably not using the cutting edge tech today. Is that about right?
Yeah, I mean, this is largely what attracted me to the opportunity, just as a business. Today there are 222 qualified intermediaries in the country.
Yeah,
90% of them, so 190 of them, are 5 employees or less. So we're talking small mom and pop shops. We're talking many that are just side hustles for people that are, brokers that, start this up as a side hustle.
right.
And, then there are 10 others besides us with any material scale. And then there's 4 firms that are all Here is the real dinger for me. Okay. And you can sort of look back to the early phase of my career and what keyed me in on the opportunity was there are 4 firms that are all subsidiaries of publicly traded companies, publicly traded title companies like Fidelity,
Yep.
Stewart Title, First American, and Old Republic. And each of these title companies has a big QI inside of it, okay, qualified intermediary. And those four firms control 80% of the market.
Classic.
And guess what? I looked at the entire filing history, every K and Q of all four of these companies in the last 20 years. And the number of times they mentioned their QI in their public filings was exactly 0. And I was like, that is really interesting. They've got these business units that on certain years add a material amount of profitability to their firms, and yet they don't talk about them at all.
Yeah.
And that's when I was like, okay, something's going on here. And so, so then you look at how the industry makes money, you look at how they operate, and yes, it is very much a business for all of many of the small firms out there. I would say the vast majority. They run their business with basically mail merge. I mean, let me just step back. The responsibility of the QI for 1031 specialists, and really for any QI, we do 3 simple things, okay? And this is it, but it is required by the IRS, to be clear. If you want to do a 1031 exchange, you have to hire a qualified intermediary. We consult with clients to make sure they know what they need to do to be successful with their exchange, okay? So there's this sort of client service aspect of it. The second responsibility is we produce the exchange documentation required by the IRS to get you the tax benefit.
Okay.
And the third thing we do is at close, when you go and sell your property, you are not allowed to touch those funds. So the qualified intermediary will receive those funds on your behalf and hold those funds until you're ready to purchase your replacement property.
Got it.
Those are the 3 rules. We don't do investment sales. We don't do brokerage. We don't do anything else around the transaction. That is our narrow rule.
Got it. So make sure that there's a consultative perspective. The 3 things. One is that there's a consultative type of conversation where the client understands what's needed, the paperwork, and then holding the funds and helping to identify those properties for the transaction to complete.
Right. And so from an ops perspective, so once you have the client acquisition process down, then it's about processing the paperwork. And so many of the 222 firms today, I would say the vast majority are literally using like Microsoft Mail Merge.
Yeah.
To merge fields onto these form documents that get you the tax benefit. And so, yeah, there's very little technology. There's very little forward thinking. There's very little interest in investing in the brand, because so many of these businesses were built, really locally, like hyper local. Let me go around, shake hands, kiss babies with, brokers and escrow companies and attorneys, and they'll send me the business because they have to send the business to someone. So they'll send it to me.
Exactly.
And so we're looking at this like, well, we can operate at national scale. There really isn't today a brand that exists in our category that has investor recall. And so we think we can build that. And you start really by, deconstructing the exchange process. Like once we get a client.
Define investor recall.
What's that?
Can you define, you said investor recall?
Sure. I mean, there is no brand that people recognize or think of when they think of doing a 1031.
Oh, I see. To recall, to understand like who the brand is. Understood.
Right. So the idea is that we can build a national brand in this category that educates everyone about this. We can talk about the frequency of 1031s and why it's really low today. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so that is the sort of stated mission, is to grow a national brand in the category.
Yeah, awesome. I think that's crazy. You said of the 200, I think 23, 190 of them are, we'll call it mom and pop, right? Pretty local, does it by spreadsheet, does it by mail merge. Wonderful. It works, but there's got to be a better way, John, right? Yeah. And so, and then you said about 4 of those 32-ish are like the top the big ones, right? The publicly traded, and then somewhere those other 30 are more or be greater than the 5 employees. And so that's really interesting info. And you're the true north of having that investor recall, customer recall, if you will, understanding like who this brand is and educating people why they do it. You gave some of that before as well of well, when you go to sell an investment property, you can pay the 40% tax, or you cannot and defer it, not pay it immediately and defer it. Um, but that brings up that question of, okay, cool, I could just pay the 40% tax. Obviously, you don't want to pay the taxes, and that's kind of another education point for you too, right? It's like, well, why don't we just make the default open? The default, just have your playbook. If you're an investor, just not even make it a question. We'll always 1031, right? So there's like, what's the downside of not doing a 1031 other than you pay the tax?
Yeah. So first, let me sort of like piece apart one of the bigger misconceptions out there, which is that, well, when I sell my property, I'm just going to pay like long-term capital gains tax, like if I held it for more than a year. That is not true. There are actually up to 4 layers of tax that any tax-paying entity is exposed to when they sell an investment property, right? It's the federal capital gains, which is 15 or 20%. It's the state tax. So in states like New York, California, those taxes can be as high as 13.3%.
Mm.
You have this thing called net investment income tax. So if you make more than a couple $100,000 a year, you're going to be subject to 3.8% on top of that.
Hmm.
And then the one most people forget about is this depreciation recapture tax. And so if you've depreciated the property quite a bit, you're going to pay 25% of whatever you depreciated. So for some people that have held $1 million property, depreciated it over the years down to close to zero, they're going to pay $250,000 just on depreciation recapture. So you blend all these things up and you get close to 40% in certain states, less in other states, less if you're not subject to net investment income and that kind of stuff. But as a general rule of thumb, we use 30% as kind of a blended tax, but it can be as high as or up to 40%.
Got it.
So default 1031. Why do we sort of talk about this? Our view is there's a lot of confusion around this. And I think part of it is, it's called a 1031 exchange. Like it's labeled like as part of the tax code. And
right.
When people sort of interact with the tax code or hear these things, they just get very nervous and they think it's going to be really confusing and difficult. And I think there's some very strange words that were inserted to describe the 1031 exchange. Like it's called like-kind exchange.
Mm.
Nobody knows what like-kind is. To me, those are the 2 most confusing words in the English language. Like-kind. If they would have just said U.S. investment property for U.S. investment property,
right,
that would be super clear, right? But they call it like-kind, and it confuses everyone. So I think on the surface, it's just super confusing. I think the way the messaging is delivered is poor, and our job is to change that narrative. Okay,
got it. So it's kind of breaking myths in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, it is. It is, and those myths start with how realtors were educated a long time ago on the subject, and how commercial real estate brokers are educated, and those are really the tip of the spear as it relates to a 1031 exchange. So if it wasn't explained well to them 20 years ago, how are they going to explain it well to their clients today? Right. And so it's part of a longer journey for us. But yeah, in my view, the 1031 should be a default yes for every investor that's subject to taxes. Why do I say that? Well, because you can get in a 1031 exchange, create the optionality of deferring your taxes. And let's say you just say, I don't like anything I identified. I don't want to close on any of these properties that I've identified here. Well, what are the consequences of getting into a 1031 exchange and falling out of it? Well, there are none. It is just as if you sold the property outright and never even explored the 1031 exchange. And if you hire us, if you hire 1031 specialists, I give you the feedback that I charge you. So you're going to pay me $11.95. We're going to do the work that we do, beforehand, create a separate bank account for you and protect your funds during the exchange period, produce the exchange documentation. I charge $1,200 for this. That's it. Just a simple flat fee, but it has a money back guarantee. So if you fall out of your exchange and you don't want to successfully finish it, well, there's no consequence to the IRS. You just pay the taxes if you would have, and I give you the fee back. So you're not out of pocket any money. You've created a free option to defer those taxes, which I think is the reason this should be default yes for everybody, right? At least get into the early period of your exchange, figure out if you're going to want to successfully complete it and buy a replacement property. And if not, say, I just like my money back, and here you go. There's your money.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a two-way door, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. That's a great way to put it.
Talk about a two-way door of like, go and see. My upside about asymmetric returns here is I spend the time to save that potentially 40% based on those 4 different tax categories you were talking about. And if it doesn't work out, I could, working with you and your team, I can get my money back. But I learned all this stuff. I'm more prepared for next time so I can be more successful. And I invested time and energy to learn. So, I mean, an absolute two-way door. That's super cool. I'm borrowing the two-way door as a Bezoism from Amazon. But it really, there's a couple questions, right? It's like, why this? Like, why should I care about the 1031? Like, what do I have to gain if I do it? What do I have to gain if I don't? Okay, cool. What's the perceived ability of being able to actually achieve this thing, and what do I have to sacrifice for it? Right. And so that's kind of like the vehicle, or thinking about, this as an option of doing it is pretty clear. Definitely go back and listen to what Jon laid out. You want to learn more about real estate professional status. I've got episodes in that as well, etc. But you've also, and we'll get into this in just a little bit. I want to highlight something else that will be our next topic, but you're bringing tech into this as well, about your own custom built GPTs based on your own experience as 1031 clients that you brought along the way, or that you learned along the way, and some of the, we'll call it pain and fees that you guys incurred getting that too. But before we get there, let's pivot a little bit here about the incubator that you're in, which I think is super cool. Some stats that you were telling me about of the National Association of Realtors, the NAR, and that they have a prop tech incubator as well that you're a part of. Tell me about this experience, like where give some background on this incubator as well, and how you guys are here in it.
Yeah, so I think I didn't know a whole lot about the NAR organization. Just that if you're a realtor, you're a part of the NAR, right? And a friend introduced me to the guys that are running this program, but it's sort of from a high level. NAR is the largest lobbying organization in the world. Okay? Mm-hmm. This is what it's been described to me. And there's 1.5 million approximately members in the US. And so you hear about this massive organization, and what you don't appreciate is all of these sub-organizations inside of this umbrella. And so one of them is a venture capital fund that is not known to a lot of people outside of kind of the prop tech world. But Second Century Ventures is this venture capital vehicle to fund new entrepreneurs that seek to access, are building prop tech companies and seek to access, the NAR network. And so inside of Second Century is this incubator called NAR Reach. And so I met Bob and the team behind NAR Reach. And, if you sort of think to our main mission here, which is, broader education, more clarity around 1031 exchanges, there really isn't a better partner in the country when you think about, accessing and educating on a broad scale, right? And so, yeah, we were thrilled when they offered us an invite to this year's cohort. A little background on the Reach program is, they've been doing this for 13 years. And one of the early investments was in DocuSign, which is a brand everybody does
Mm-hmm.
recognize. So they've had a lot of success, and they're really sort of on the expansion path for their incubator. Um, but they've never in 13 years, no QI ever even applied to this program.
That seems crazy to me, doesn't it?
Crazy. Um, yeah, the more like a lot of the brokers and the people in the industry have heard about 1031s. They understand the mechanics.
Yeah.
But what gets lost a little is they don't understand that the qualified intermediary has to be involved in this process. So there's like a piece missing in a lot of the knowledge base for many people. And so, yeah, I think it's a commentary on how small the QI industry really is. Like, here's an example. We've not only mapped out every single QI in the country, but actually every professional inside every QI in the country.
Sure.
And there are less than 1,000 humans that do this work. Okay, that's from admins to sales to execs. Okay, and like in contrast, okay, see, like in contrast, there are 600,000 CPAs in this country.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it is what I believe. I think it's the smallest niche in real estate. Period. Despite its smallness in both number of firms and humans, there is about $100 billion that flows through QI hands each year.
Right.
So you have this unbelievable leverage to the money, right? And we can talk about the business model and how QIs make money later. But yeah, back to the Reach program. They invited us, and now we're in this cohort with 8 other amazing companies in the prop tech space, and yeah, they've been really, really helpful in our mission, which is let's get out there and educate people. Let's colonize the minds, make sure everyone understands what this is in a simple, clear way, and try to make the default option for investors 1031 yes.
Right. Absolutely. I'm still just like running the math and running everything in my head about, there only being how many did you say, like 200? No, 230
222 firms, yeah.
Well, one more time.
222 firms.
And how many people in those firms?
Less than 1,000.
Less than 1,000. That's what the number was. Less than 1,000. Yeah, versus I think it was the 600,000 CPAs.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so 1,000 and 600,000. Yeah, that's it's kind of, I can imagine seeing it from your perspectives, like, oh, this place is waiting to be disrupted, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, but 13 years for this VC, this VC group inside of NAR to be operating and never have had a qualified intermediary come through, and for there to be so much power for investors to be able to continue to exchange and it to be written into the tax code. And yet many of the people being like, avoiding taxes, it's
Absolutely.
This always drives me crazy, especially with, some acquaintances and people I know, not to get political in the whole thing, but it's very interesting. It's like written into the tax code. So super cool. I wanted to highlight that because I thought that was really cool to learn about. And, speaking of things like two-way doors, like, one of, I look at other thought leaders or the people out there. I'm always looking for things to learn from people. And one of those is Peter Diamandis. He works with Tony Robbins and team and, other Elon and other thought leaders, especially something around like X Prize. But what's really cool about one thing he talks about, as well as Bezos, is how technologies had to get to a certain place, right, for Amazon to work. There had to be payment process, there had to be shipping, there had to be all these things in place, supply routes, and similar to like what you and your team are doing, right, using GPTs, OpenAI GPTs, to have your own body of knowledge for 1031 knowledge base as well. And tell me a little about that and how you came to get that body of knowledge into 1031 specialist, and ultimately what's done with that.
Yeah. So about 15, 16 months ago, we're as a firm 3 years old, although we have very tenured and experienced professionals here. So if you add up the experience in 1031 in real estate, it's something like 250 years, right?
Yep.
So the age of the firm doesn't represent the age of the experience, but when we were starting out, we wanted to make sure we got everything absolutely right always.
Mm-hmm.
And so we partnered with there's some specialty law firms that focus on 1031 exchanges, and one of them became our partner. And we would get these edge case questions from both clients and non-clients, and we just decided, because we're doing things the absolute right way, we want the best client experience, we're going to pay to get answers to these questions.
Mm-hmm.
And so every single email I would send to the group, I'd get a bill for $500. And, after low 5 figures in fees, I just told myself, like, well, there's got to be a better way. This is getting crazy.
Yeah.
And, when you look at our space, it's, and really the knowledge base behind 1031s, I call it it's like an inch wide, mile deep. Right. And it's also generally fixed. Like, it doesn't change dynamically month to month or year to year. It's pretty fixed in its knowledge base. There's a little bit new, but generally speaking, it's this inch wide, mile deep, fixed domain. That is perfect for training an LLM on.
Absolutely.
Right? And so we just said, well, and there's got to be a better way. Like, these new tools we have to be able to leverage these new tools. And, we already leverage new technology to build our processing software, right? We built it all from scratch, and it took a little bit of money and a little bit of time, because today's tech is just so good, right?
Yes.
So we embarked on this project and the first part of it, and really the hard part, was gathering the entire corpus of 1031 knowledge that exists in this country.
Like 800,000 words or
yeah, almost 1 million words. It's the policy itself, but it's also IRS technical memorandum that's been written. It's their field notes that have been written. It's opinion letters that have been written. It is this whole body of knowledge that we fed into OpenAI's a private GPT that we spun up on OpenAI. And we started using it, and after 48 hours internally, we all had this aha moment. Like, wow, this is really, really good.
Right.
And so we used it internally. We tested it with about 100 different partners. We said, hey, bang on this. What do you think? And some of the quotes back were like, and these are experienced brokers and lawyers, and, couldn't stump it. Wow, what an amazing tool, right? And so we just started using it internally. And since the day we sort of launched this internally, we didn't have a single legal bill since then. Right?
Super cool.
And so we did it internally only for this reason of to scratch our own itch, to see if this could work. And when it worked, it solved our problem internally. But then after a few months, we're like, man, this is so good that wouldn't it be great? Because our mission is education. Our mission is to lower the friction and the barrier to knowledge in this category. So let's just surface this on our website and let everybody play with this to get answers anytime they want. And so we did that. And then a few weeks after we launched it publicly, and this was about 15 months ago, we launched it publicly. We got a call from those attorneys, and they said, well, what we think you're doing is unauthorized practice of law, so we are firing you as our client. And I just laughed to myself because of how silly it all is. But it is a proof that, the knowledge worker category is also under assault here by AI, right?
100%.
And so, yeah, so now that we built this 1031 brain, the goal is let's make it available and easy for people to use. And so since we launched it, you can find this on our website at 1031 specialists with an S at the end.com. And in the bottom right, you can surface it up and start asking away. But I went to a large commercial real estate prop tech conference about a year ago. And there's a guy, JLL is one of the larger brokerage firms in the country. And they have a guy that runs their AI program. And I went up to him and said, hey, I built this tool. I would love to just give it to you. I will give you everything. And just to allow your brokers to be able to get access to information when they want about 1031s.
Nice.
And when he told me, he said, Jon, I've been banging my head against the wall for years on this. The one thing you will probably never be able to do is change human behavior. And I said, okay. He said, nobody's going to use your tool if it's like a sort of internet, chatbot, or they got to go to your website. He said, well, why don't you make it something I can email? Everyone's on their email. So just make it an email that I can send to. And so 4 days later, it became an email. So now if you email AI at mr1031.com, so AI at mr1031.com, it'll instantly hit the brain and give you an email back with your answer. And so for us, it's about, now that we have the sort of the core tool, it's about how do we extend it. And then the latest thing we just did is we were constantly playing with this new tech, and 11 Labs is one of the sort of leaders in the voice category for AI, and we started looking at not their consumer version, but their enterprise developer version, and we had this wow, this is finally ready. There's very little latency. The voice sounds great. This can work for inbound. And so we created this 1031 hotline that, again, goes into the brain and gets the answer, but sounds just like our employee. And imagine being I've got this business development professional in San Diego called Aaron. Okay. And Aaron is just a wonderful guy, has this radio voice and TV face. Okay. So he's but this voice, everyone says, oh man, it sounds like the radio. So I was like, Aaron, can you record your voice? And so he spent 3 hours recording his voice. We fed that into 11 Labs. And then we started testing it, and it sounds just like him. And I was like, Aaron, how does it feel to call yourself and ask yourself questions to test this tool? And he's just this was the weirdest, strangest thing I've ever experienced in my life.
Dude, he's immortalized.
He's immortalized, yes.
Once your data's on the internet, it never goes away, right?
But it literally sounds just like Aaron. So we call it AI Aaron. And yeah, so these tools are fun to play with. They're really effective. They're very good. For us, they're almost perfect, right? I mean, they provide amazing answers with very low friction. And so that's part of our strategy is we do this stuff, we spend money and effort on this stuff, and we give it away for free to further the mission of investor education.
Yeah, man. It's really cool, right? Solving your own internal problem first, because, you're doing things with your own properties, and seeing that, having that thesis, we talked about before about the 232, QIs, and, that whole conversation we had to figuring out, okay, most of these mom and pops, what can we do here to, being in that incubator for NAR, and they haven't even had, someone come in for the last 13 years in their existence in their environment is definitely we're on to something, even more so to this part here too. So just, this multi-threading of stuff, tech being ready, 11 Labs, you're being ready, and continuing to revisit your customer, right? JLL, whoever that contact was, to just be you're not going to change human behavior. We have to interface it to the way that they're used to doing it, which the majority of realtor workforce is going to be still emailing and still be, calling. It's not like they're pulling up a console and, have a conversation about what the cloud is, right?
Right.
So
exactly.
And so it's such a cool story to, and really cool development along the way. to build what you guys have built today.
Thank you.
There's so many other things I wanted to get into about this too, but I know you got a ton of documentation, ton of blogs, ton of videos, and also, the AI that you have on the site too. You were telling me that you put together not only some of the marketing stuff, but also the voice that you have for 1031 specialists so that it's a lot clearer, just the facts, right? And not all this fluffy language and simplified language too. So it's not, for light kind. It's just do this, this kind of
Right.
language, right?
Right.
So, um, you know, I know I gotta let you go here in a minute, but just kind of close this off. You've talked about the influence of mentors for you in the past, and how that's kind of shaped this, meandering but interesting life path for you to get where you are today. I'd love for you to maybe reflect back and, do you have maybe some great advice you were given by mentors that it's okay if you don't have to tailor this to be like how it's super applicable for your audience, but just what it was for you that helped shape how you took the next step for your path along the way?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, I think generally people are bad at reading self-help books or hearing from someone really smart like Ray Dalio or
Hmm.
Charlie Munger and actually applying, or Bezos, right? Of course, and applying those lessons themselves. I think this is like a like a huge error in our code, is that we have to learn these lessons ourselves, basically, right? And
Sure.
then we believe them. So I think there's a ton of stuff I could say here, but I think the observation I've had, at least for me, even as someone that considers himself pretty well read and curious, is there's nothing like life to teach you, what the right path is. And for me, it was like kind of started. I went to school at a big state school, UF. Okay, so University of Florida, and I graduated in 2004. And going into my junior year is like, okay, you need the internship that's going to set you up for kind of postgraduate, starting career. And so I went to this career fair at UF, and I was interested in working on Wall Street. Like that's what I wanted to do. I sort of had my the singular vision of where I was going, and this kind of dogged determination to get there. But you go to this career fair, and there's one investment bank that was there. Okay,
Mm.
that investment bank was Lehman Brothers, and Lehman Brothers was hiring for one job in operations. And I looked around, there's like 500 finance students graduating or trying to get this internship. And I just looked to myself and said, like, I got to do this myself. Like, this is not going to get handed to you. This is not going to be someone just coming up to you and saying, you're great, come work at our company. And because of that sort of dogged determination, I just decided, like, I need to go get it. Right. And so I just started reaching out. I didn't have a network. My dad didn't work on Wall Street. Right. We were a middle class family, super, super wonderful childhood, but like, it wasn't like I had all these deep connections in finance.
Yep.
And yeah, just decided to start cold calling people
Nice.
and saying, like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this myself. And it was the curiosity of me having read these books like Liar's Poker and Barbarians at the Gate and Rape
Yeah.
and Wall Street. These finance and Wall Street books that surfaced in an early conversation with someone I reached out to at Goldman. And Goldman does not hire from UF, to be clear. Like, this is not something that they are interested in doing. And but that resonated, and that sort of that approach of me just sort of putting myself out there and saying there's nobody but me to do this, got me that first internship, which got me that job that sort of launched the career that I still kind of lean on and say, yeah, I'm former Goldman. Like, that's a badge of honor that I use, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's sort of a BS non-answer for you. So sorry, Steve, but I just think advice generally is is pretty hollow. I think you got to go figure it out on your own. And once you decide you're going to go do that, many doors open up for you.
I think it makes a lot of sense. My takeaway from it is to pursue your curiosity and just get after it. Just simply put, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah. Jon, appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for being here. I'll get all your information in the show notes for all the places people to find you. Appreciate your time. I look forward to our next conversation. Take care.
Be amazing. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Path to Passive. We love connecting with our listeners and those on the path to architecting their wealth and improving their lives. Feel free to let us know what topics you'd like to see in future episodes. Get in touch with us through email or Instagram. See you next week for a new episode.